Hey, this is Tarence Lauchié, and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this podcast, The Growth Exchange. This podcast was designed to curate conversation, dialogue, and monologue around all things growth. I believe that everything living has the potential to grow into its fullest and most maximal potential. So let's grow. Greetings and welcome to another edition of The Growth Exchange. I'm Dr. Tarence Lauchié. I'm excited about you being here, but I'm even more excited about who I have as a guest today. We're going to be talking about some passions that we share, and that is, of course, development in males, African-American males, non-African-American males, but men of God, men who are attempting to find God. But a man of God has written a great book. He's my guest today, and he's really not a stranger or guest. He's been in the studio before, kind of eavesdropping, ear hustling as we were interviewing with his wife. But this is John Bolden. John, welcome, man.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm glad you're here. You are the author of the book, 18 Principles for Manhood, of Manhood for Young Males. And you wrote this book some time ago. I've had an opportunity to share it, and then we've shared it over and over again, I think 3 times in life groups, small life groups.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for writing this. 2005, was it? When did
2017.
17. There it is, 2017.
Yep.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, congratulations, one, on this being the first of many, probably, right?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Most people want to know whenever they're checking out a podcast, whether they're just listening to it or watching it, if it's videotaped. It's like, who is that? Who is and why is he on the show?
I got you. Well, I am a author and I am a speaker. Also, I am a husband to a lovely wife, DeAndrea Bolden, and a father to 2 beautiful kids, a daughter and a son. So just a little bit about myself again, like author, speaker. So yeah, I'm just one of, few words. So at times.
Yeah, but you're on a podcast.
I got you.
And we're talking. It's called The Exchange for a reason.
I got you.
No, we got a lot to exchange. I was blessed to be able to participate in you all's nuptials years ago. Y'all been married now how many years?
Going on 15 years this year.
15 years ago. You
Yes.
stood there and said, I do.
Absolutely.
And she did.
Absolutely.
And y'all do.
Yes, sir.
Right now. No, man, I'm proud of you, and I thank God for you being an example of that. Marriage, of course, and an example of a man with work ethics, a son in ministry, but then also a man about the community. You spend quite a bit of your time coaching, training, developing, and then providing guidance for young males. You've worked in corrections or
Correct.
even in, I guess it's corrections, right?
Yes.
In corrections or detention. Which of the two? Is it?
I prefer corrections.
Yes, because
Yeah,
detention sounds so negative, right?
Right.
Correction at least has some potential for hope.
Right.
Like, I can do better, right?
I hear you.
But you've done that. Tell me a little bit about your passion behind wanting to work in that field, specifically for young men.
So one of my passions, or my passion is that it goes back to my father. My father did not have his father in his life, and he said to us as we were growing up, it was 4 of us boys, but 6 children altogether.
Mm-hmm.
He said that he wanted to make sure that he was in our lives. Now this is back in the 70s, 80s, to where it was one income, for the family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but the thing was, my father never, ever experienced having a father in his life. He had father figures as an adult, but he said to us, he was like, hey, I just want to make sure that you have a father figure, a natural one, and also to make sure that we have also other father figures in our life. So that kind of that was kind of like the basic of, me having to deal with young men. And then I started to see where I grew up, I started to see young men just going down the rabbit hole, as in going to jail, getting some of my friends passing away from gun violence. And I started to see that, and as I started to see that, it really started to hit my heart, and I was like, okay, something has to be done. I was raised in church. Sometimes I wasn't in church, but I was.
You was in the church, but the church wasn't in you.
Exactly.
I know.
But that being said, when I really started to understand that, man, a lot of times these guys are doing bad things, it's because they don't have the father in the home.
Sure.
And kudos to the single moms. Kudos to them. But only a man can raise a man. You know, and sometimes that hits kind of tough, you know, with people because, like, you know, in today's society, well, you know, but we have to realize that some of the things that we are dealing with in today's time is simply because the father is not in the home. But that's a whole
Yeah.
different.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that because, you know, I've done research in that area and have published a doctoral thesis around that, the impact of fatherlessness and how it affects the efficacy, self-efficacy, and self-esteem of individuals. But the tables are turning also. The tables are
Absolutely.
turning on those statistics. And people like yourself
sir.
committed to doing the work, writing the books, making the presentations, offering conferences and workshops and seminars, all makes a difference. It makes a difference because we can go from it being a crisis to being a creative moment.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
good. That's
Let's talk a
good.
little about that because you're a creative as well. I know that. In addition to writing, you're a musician. You know, just talk a little bit about how you were able to take what you had to become the man that you are.
Okay. So first and foremost, you know, God, you know, the Bible says, trust in the Lord with all thy heart and lean not to the understanding and all the ways acknowledge him. That's the church kid coming out, you know, with that.
You can't go 20 seconds without quoting the scripture.
Right.
That's a good thing.
Right.
In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path.
So, you know, that was the first and most important thing was God. And then second thing is, you know, I did sports. But sports I was kind of like a quiet jock. You know, just with that, you know, I was good with certain things, but at
Me
the
too.
same
I was so quiet they never even heard. So I'm quiet about it right now, even now. No, I didn't take the athletic route. I was the academic.
Oh, okay.
I did debate, public speaking,
What?
tennis teams,
see?
glee club, newspaper, yearbook.
I got you.
I was the nerd and you was the jock.
I got you. But one of my favorite sports was tennis.
Okay.
You know, I'm just gonna let you know. So,
Okay.
but with that, and then also third thing was it was just kind of like how to go into it when I started to get into these corrections facilities, and then when I really started to understand, and even like juveniles, and then going into these homes.
Sure.
When I really started to understand I was like, these young men are hurting. They are hurting, and they had so much anger built up. It was just, man, why is these kids so mad? Why are these kids have so much anger built up? And then I started to realize is that a lot of them came to me. We had conversations, and the reason why we had those conversations was because of the fact of I had to really be consistent in saying, okay, I care.
So you wanted to be there for them, hear what they had to say.
Exactly.
What gave you the instinct to go in that field anyway? Because out of school, you had to do something. You had to pick a career, and you chose corrections.
Correct. So, like with criminal justice was like with the background. And the reason why I wanted to go into that career, you know, and kudos to my big brother.
Okay.
You know, shout out to my big brother.
He was an
Joe.
example.
Yeah, he
Joe.
was definitely an example because, you know, I saw him going to college, and he was the first one in our family to graduate from college. And that was just a role model in a sense in that aspect. So I saw that, and he went into criminal justice. And one of the things I saw with the justice system to where it's like, okay, hey, but I started to see that with some things, the playing field is not the same.
Yeah.
You know, so when I started to understand that, I was like, oh, okay, you know, and sometimes I can be a rebel,
Okay.
with that, and I'm not a yes man. And because I'm not a yes man, I'm like, I always want to see the solution in whatever problem there is.
Yeah.
Sometimes my wife like, what in the world is going on? Like, okay, I just need to talk to you about the problem. What's going on? But you know,
you're looking for equity.
Exactly.
You want the equity in it. I get it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that, you know, really helped me go into that.
Sure.
As well.
So you like to see justice executed in a proper way.
Correct.
But it almost seems like you had a calling to fulfill in that you grew up with a dad who poured into you.
Yes, sir.
Brothers that poured. Where do you fall in the rank? You're
So I am the second to the youngest.
second to the youngest. So
Yes.
you're almost the youngest. I get it. I get it. The second to the youngest, but you had a chance to see through examples, some role models up the chain, as they would
Correct.
say, of some good godly men. But that passion, I guess, was stirred early. You've pursued it,
Yes.
brought you to a place where you've written a book, and I know you've got many other works. But let's talk a little bit about these 18 principles of manhood for young males. Off air, we were talking a little bit about the emphasis of this book deals specifically with anger, but you also address issues like fear
Correct.
and some of the other responsibilities that's pretty much within us, to handle, like avoiding temptation and overcoming lust or being lazy, effective communication. These are topics that some men never get an opportunity to have a chance to talk about. But these are topics that are relevant to just development, adult development, becoming a grown man.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about why you chose these topics.
So I chose those topics is because, some of the things that I was dealing with within myself. And then I saw some that was dealing within my friends, not just with my friends, but just as young males in general. One of the topics, like I said before, with anger, I just saw a lot of men just angry, these young men angry, even growing up, just like, why are you so mad? And in today's society, we say, oh, if a man is mad, oh, he's macho, he's like tough, like, okay, hey. But now it's like telling these in the book, I explain to where, hey, you got to deal with your anger. And some of that anger is dealt with past trauma, and because you dealt with trauma, you have to go back and deal with that, because if you don't, then you will continue to cycle,
Sure.
with that.
So let's talk a little bit or unpack some of what those past trauma experiences might have entailed. Because we've kind of landed on the same page as it relates to helping men to develop. In fact, we're participating together in an upcoming symposium.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Entitled Father's Faith and Freedoms, in which we'll have panel discussions as well as a presentation on the effects of fatherhood.
Yes, sir.
And how important it is. But looking at some of the traumas that men experience, and that's of all ethnic backgrounds, it creates new prototypes that are either flawed or in some kind of way broken.
Yes.
So let's talk about broken men, because broken men have created almost an epidemic. Yeah, I think it's Frederick Douglass's that it's easier to teach children good ways than, and I'm paraphrasing, than to try to repair broken men. These things that break men, what are some of those things that you identify as the elements that help make them angry, make them rejected, make them violent,
One in particular, and I think this may be overlooked, is not being able to be listened to. I think
so
that's
not being heard.
Yep, not being heard, because, a lot of times with these young men, when they are talking to you, or they're just, conversing with anybody, a lot of times they're being told what to do instead of, okay, hey, you know what, let me see your point of view. A lot of times, people are not just listening because they're like, oh, okay, he another statistic, or hey, he just like his father.
Yeah,
just stuff like that.
So
and
before he gets a chance to be, he gets written
Exactly.
off already.
Correct. Yes.
Is that societal, community? What do you think?
I think that it's more so community.
So it starts within a small
Correct.
community.
Yes.
Let's look at the scenario, unpack it, because I think I'm understanding where you're heading. A boy grows up in a fatherless situation. Father might even be alive, but it's a fatherless situation. And his mom is the greater influence, or women in particular. And the women have certain expectations. When he doesn't meet those expectations, he becomes labeled now just like his father, or a deadbeat, or whatever. And then society also pushes him out because there's no affirmation.
Absolutely. You hitting it
And,
right
and
on.
that affirmation is missing usually in the way that he's suggested to dress. He's now influenced by, a negative example of what to dress like or how to look in the streets. And you talked about that exterior, that hard exterior.
Yes.
Yeah. That I hope I'm kind of tapping
No,
into
you
it. Your
are.
book is good, and it addresses those questions without asking them.
And that's one of the things, I'm glad you said that, because that's one of the things that I wanted to really hit, because, and I look at it like this. It's a small book, but I'm hoping that it's impactful, because as a young man, you know, to be honest with you, the reading levels, it was just to the point to where I was like, okay, you know what? Are these young men going to really read a thick book? And I was like, no. You know, I know how I was when I was younger.
Right.
I was
So
like,
you
look,
wasn't that interested?
I'm not trying to do that right now. But at the same time, it was just like, okay, you know what? This is a short book, but I wanted to make sure that hit certain topics real hard, quick to the point. Because when you're real quick and to the point, they are able to grasp things, you know, quickly instead of just being lectured.
Yeah, what topic within the book stands out most to you as far as, and then we'll take a break and then come back and talk about it a little bit more. But what topic stands out the most to you from the book that you wrote?
So for me, I would say identity. I would say identity. And the reason why identity is because when you don't have an identity, you take on any other identity that is not what you are created for.
Wow. So identity is page number 39 in the book.
Yes,
It's a
sir.
good book. Like I said, we've had some small groups to be birthed out of using this, and a couple of other men have asked me for copies, so we got to get some more. I like the fact that you've got journaling as a spot here. But you talk about, that was the wrong one. I was going to talk about the fact that identity is so significant in that it helps us to not only know who we are, but it helps us to let people know who we are trying to become.
Absolutely.
Identity is present tense. It's not, you used to be something, you are something, you're going to be is present tense. It says, in life, your actions will always speak louder than your words. Yes. And that kind of introduces then the chapter on the identity that we have as men: providers, protectors, and priests.
I call it the 3 Ps.
The 3 Ps?
Yes.
I love it. I teach it all the time. Now, this isn't only from a religious perspective.
Absolutely.
This actually deals with life in general.
Correct. Absolutely.
Listen, man, we're going to take a break. This is exciting. We're going to take a break, and when we come back from the break, I want to get further into the conversation of not just your motivation behind helping men to develop or boys to develop into men, but then also some things that are happening in your life. The excitement of being a dad, being a husband, a brother, a minister, as well as someone who's working in the community. I see global things for you. But we'll talk about that when we come back from the break. We'll be right back. This episode is sponsored by Speak Media Services, where we believe everyone deserves the opportunity to capture and preserve their unique stories. You're not just another number in the crowd. Your individuality matters. Our intimate photography and videography services are tailored to your vision and budget, ensuring your essence shines through. Allow us to help preserve the moments that mean the most. With our support, you'll create cherished keepsakes to treasure for years to come. Speak Media Services, your story, your way. Hey, welcome back. We're still in a intense conversation talking about not only the 18 principles of manhood for young males, but then also John Bolden, who's the author, the man who's also a developer of men. What drives your passion behind developing other men?
What drives my passion is that I want to see men develop so that they can be able to duplicate themselves.
Yeah.
Because a lot of men, like for me, my son, I love seeing my son. Like right now, he's 13, going on 14. Right now, he
13.
Right,
His voice is beginning to change. He's getting
exactly.
tall.
Because just like a couple of days ago, he was like, "Hey, Dad, how you doing?" And I'm looking like
he was exercising. He was,
exactly.
He was flexing his voice on you. Oh wow!
So I was like,
I'm
okay.
having flashbacks of my
Right.
son. It's like, yeah, okay.
But yeah, I think that's one thing that helps me, to help develop men, because I love it when I see my son, just mimic me, as a man, his father, and
that is a very high honor to see him want to mimic you. Yeah, think about that.
Yeah.
We want to duplicate the positive
Absolutely.
as much as possible, but to see him mimic you in some kind of way. My sons used to. Well, it started out, they would go to the door where we leave our shoes, and one of them came back, had on his mom's shoes. I was like, you can play in dad's shoes, but you can't play in mom's shoes, because when you grow up, you want to be able to fill those shoes and then some. And so, it was humorous at the time, but it definitely made a difference. And I'm proud to say that, that they can come steal my shoes anytime because shoes represent, of course, your footsteps and where you're headed. What kind of footsteps are you leaving right now?
And it's interesting that you say that because I don't know. And that's, to be honest with you, is because I really don't look at it like as me trying to leave footsteps. I'm like, man, what can I just do to help?
Yeah, in the moment.
In the moment, yeah. So I'm just, and that's a awesome question because I really haven't looked at it like that.
Yeah.
Really, basically, leaving those footsteps.
I think it's the old man in me talking right now. That every step that we take, literally, we're leaving an imprint, or we're making some form of a demarcation for somebody to follow or to avoid. I know we've not always got it right, and no father has. But I think if we're intentional about it, and if we're doing it on purpose, leaving clues along the way, we could probably help hundreds, if not thousands, or millions. Yeah. What would you say to a young man listening right now who's just trying to get his life together, make some career choices, family decisions? What would be your word of insight, wisdom, or maybe even advice?
So one thing I would say is what you permit, you promote.
I like that.
And one of the things with that is whatever you are doing in life, you have to have counsel. You got to have counsel. Whatever you are doing in life, make sure you are surrounding yourself with men that you want to be that's successful. There's always going to be a man in your life that's successful that will reach out. Not will reach out, but will always be willing to help.
Yeah.
But you have to make the first step.
Ask for it,
Yeah.
So you're a strong proponent of mentoring and the dynamics of training up through example. Yeah. Let's talk about your analogies. What would you draw the analogy between, a young man now finding his way, because I'm trying to take you on a journey, developing these principles to grown man stuff. Now he's all grown up. He's got his family. He's attempting to do the right thing. What would you say to him?
So I would say to that one, first, kudos. Good job, with that. And then the second thing is making sure that what you have learned, put it down to your son, or get involved in the community to make sure that these young men, because you'll be surprised just by showing up to things consistently, these young men will just be attached to you. But that's one thing I would say, get into the community, make sure it starts at the home first. So make sure you get your home situated. Community, and then also, every man has a creative side, and because every man has a creative side, you have to find what you are creative. Some men work good with their hands. You can leave that legacy with that. So just kind of find what you're good at and then rock with that.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense when you think about discovering. Self-discovery leads you to a level of confidence that leads you to a level of leaving the impression as opposed to faking it. You stop and think about it. Many of the negative examples that we have are men faking it. They're faking somebody else's life that they've either seen on a video or some type of media exposure, maybe even a negative neighborhood exposure.
Absolutely.
I learned from my neighborhood growing up in Detroit what not to be very often. There was a store owner across the street. He also taught Taekwondo. I mean, I looked at that. I was like, man, I would like to own my own business one day. I didn't master the Taekwondo thing, but just the whole concept of the idea of being well-rounded. Just down the street, though, were drug dealers, or across the street was a pimp, and around the corner was all those things. So we're oftentimes surrounded by both the good and the bad.
Absolutely.
Where does choice play a part in this? I'm always setting you up for be ready for the ball.
I got you. Way up.
Yeah, exactly. Where does choice fit?
So choice fits in your environment, and what I mean by that is sometimes, of course, people have, these young men have, bad environments, around them, but sometimes being exposed to different things causes them to make different choices. I think that's why it's so important to bring things into our community that counteracts the negative things that happen in our community,
Right.
you know, with that. And when we started to see those positive, you know, things started to happen in the community and they being exposed to whatever that may be, it's like, okay, it seems like it's a spark. It's like every time. Now, sometimes they want to hide it because like, oh man, like, I like this. Hold on, my boy's right here.
They don't want to admit that they're being influenced in a positive way, right?
You know, but you know that's one thing. So yeah.
Peer pressure then I guess plays a part in our choices. Then
Absolutely.
being able to choose on your own. There's some good examples out there, you know, and I think that you're capturing some very important elements, not just in this book, but you host gatherings, conferences. Talk a little bit about those.
So yeah, we're hosting a gathering this month, and it's just a man's gathering. The theme is built to lead, you know, and you know a lot of times with young males, you know, and just men in general, you know, sometimes have trouble with leading, you know, because if you've never been led before, how do you know how to lead, you know, just with that. And then dealing with that, and then, you know, also, you know, just, you know, some other things, you know, are coming soon to come, but just, you know, trying to
got some stuff.
you know.
I know that people can reach you on your social media, but how would you like people to contact you? Best way
So
to get people.
they can contact me through Facebook, John Bolden, Instagram, John Bolden 365.
I like that. John Bolden 365.
Yeah. So
we need to be following that. You know?
And then I'm also on YouTube. Just starting on
What you
YouTube.
doing on YouTube? Let's talk a little bit about that. You brought it up, man.
So right now, you know, just kind of restructuring some things in YouTube. YouTube is John B. the Speaker, you know, just with that, and really starting to call to action to men to say, okay, hey, you know, what are we doing? You know, what part can you play to make sure that our men are coming into a society that's conducive to have success. You know, just
So it's a challenge almost. Is this a monologue, dialogue?
So it's kind of both conversational.
Sure.
So this is like, you know, you getting like the hot off the press right now.
Nice.
You know, with that. So in the next couple months, you know, we should be.
So we'll be looking out for that.
Yeah.
Listen, I think there's always room for more insights, advancements, experiences, and because you come from you know, good stock, as they would say, good background. Your dad was there. Your dad is a very good example, nobleman in the community as well as the church. But you also have had a chance to work very closely with men who hadn't been so fortunate, and young men who've grown up. Do you have any success stories? Any young men that you've seen to grow up and become better at what it is that they were starting out to do?
It's interesting that you say that, because over the years that I've worked at, on like in Messenger text, I get countless, like, you know, texts and emails. Mr. B. Like,
were you were with a county facility, or was it a state facility that you worked?
It was a county.
County, okay.
Yep. It was a county, and you know, a lot of county, and then also like with the Homeland Security.
Got it.
With that, you know, I was privileged.
You were ICE?
Huh?
You were like ICE? I'm messing with you. It's a podcast. It's got to be fun. You know?
But yeah, so with that, like, you know, they would message me and they would say, "Hey, Dr. B, thank you for saving my life."
Nice.
You know, and you know, it would just take me back, because I'm like,
you didn't know you was doing that, right?
I was like, man, you know, I'm just trying to help you out, you know, with that. Yeah. But it was one story to where, you know, he was a DC boy, and like, over in DC is, you know, it's a different world, but changed his life, and now, you know, he's married, got his college degree, and awesome, just going forward. So so
that's exciting. I know it makes you feel good to hear that. I used to do work in the prison, one of the state penitentiaries. I would do work there, and years later, one of the men who was a resident came visited us
Awesome.
at church, and he was like, "Y'all don't know if you remember me." I was like, "I do." He said, "You helped me back," and I can relate to that sense of that feeling of, I don't know, I was just doing what I thought was the right thing at the time, and it did make an impact. And that should be a message to anybody that's listening to keep doing the little good that you can do, because every little counts. You know, if it's nothing but teaching a young man how to tie a tie, or tell them, hey, straighten up your handshake, man. Walk. I got a chance to meet a friend of mine's son.
Okay.
And the young man just stuck his hand out. I was like, "Hi, my name is," and he shook my hand. I was taken back because, you don't see that every single day. But somebody had to teach him that. Somebody had to show him. You look a person in the eye, you tell them your name, you shake their hand with a firmness, and you listen to hear what their name is and address them by their name. I mean, all this is stuff and I appreciate what you do. Let's talk a little bit about this symposium that we've got coming up. You're a part of the planning committee for this. For those who may not know about it, just tell them what you know about the symposium.
So what I know, first of all, thank you for even having me on the committee. I appreciate that.
Thanks for being a part.
But with the symposium, it's Fathers, Faith, and Freedom. And one of the things that I love what you're doing is you're getting people from all walks of life, and you wanted them to come together as men, just to make sure it's like, okay, hey, you have resources here. You have resources, but not only just resources, let's have this discussion. What do you need? And, when I came onto the committee, one thing that I loved about it is that your genuineness, your authenticity about just making sure that, like, look, we're not trying to do nothing or sway nothing different. It's just like, look, these people need to understand what's going on. Let's not sugarcoat nothing. And I love that. So I appreciate it. I'm like, when you was like committee, I was like, I appreciate that,
well,
Dr. T.
You're also going to be a vendor at the symposium.
Yes, sir.
Symposium's taking place on Saturday, June 14th. And it's going to be held at the Calvin University Seminary,
Correct.
Calvin Theological Seminary, just off of Bolden here in the city of Grand Rapids. But as a vendor, you'll have your books there. Planning on the planning committee, you're giving me insights. But in our panel discussion, what we plan to talk about would be, like you said, the real stuff, the real issues facing boys, men, fathers today, because the statistics are turning. I had a chance to do something with the African American Male Achievement Conference here in the city of Grand Rapids. Awesome. And I think it was 900 middle school and high schoolers in one day. And we had some breakout sessions, and each session I took a quick straw poll. I said, well, how many of you all got fathers in your home? More than 50% of them raised their hand, which means that, this particular generation, the Gen Z and the Alpha generation, they are experiencing more fatherhood impact in a positive way. And we need to talk about that too. We could talk about and lament all the negativity of fatherlessness from the boomer era, the Xers and the millennials. But now there's a generation of men who have said, I'm gonna stick with my family. I'm gonna do what's necessary to keep my kids safe and secure, being the priest, the protector, and the provider. I want to give you the closing words, man. We're wrapping up, running out of time. Just some closing words, maybe even exhortation of encouragement to somebody listening.
So I just want to say to you that be encouraged. I know in today's society there's a lot of things going on, but you can make it. Not only that you can make it, but just make sure that, sometimes you just have to have confidence in what you have to do. And, a lot of times, you have the negativity of people talking. I call them gunslingers. They quick to shoot your dreams down. But you have to learn how to be connected to positive people. You have to learn, first of all, to be connected to God, and then second of all, positive people. And then third of all, you have to be informed. You have to learn. You have to educate yourself. You have to make sure you comprehend what you're learning, and then get the wisdom, put it into action. I always, my father always said, get the knowledge, get the understanding, and get the wisdom. Knowledge is your information, and understanding is your comprehension, and wisdom is just putting it into action. So you got this, man. You got this. Don't think you're alone, okay? All right.
Well spoken, just like a champ. Man, I appreciate you. Shout out, of course, to your wife, Dr. DeAndrea Bolden,
Yes.
who's doing mental health and wellness
Yes.
from both the professional and the spiritual side.
Absolutely.
So you guys are a dynamic team and a dynamic duo. I'm honored to have you here today. And appreciate you being here. John Bolden, thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me.
Gotta
sir.
have you back. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Growth Exchange. I'm Dr. Tarence Lauchié. It's been a pleasure to have these conversations and dialogues with our guests. If you notice, one thing we all share in common, and that is the ability, the desire, and the potential to grow and maximize our fullest potential. So keep tuning in. Share this with somebody, like it, maybe even invite somebody. And if you'd like to be a guest, contact us with the information that's here and available for you. Let's grow.